Hello and welcome to episode 193 of the Thinking LSAT podcast in Vienna, Virginia. This is Ben Olson with Nathan Fox in Los Angeles. How's it going, Nathan?
Good. You're still a tiny bit out of breath, I think, from your run.
I guess so, yeah. So I ran 2 miles. It was my 12th fastest run, according to Runkeeper, which means nothing. But yeah. So I ran right before the show. I was trying to squeeze it in because I knew afterward would be tough.
What are we going to do on the show today?
We are going to have an email about applying first to get admission advice.
Yep. It's an
Applying first.
It's an interesting tactic that one law school is using. We'll get there.
Okay. Interesting. All right. And then we're going to go over game 4 from the June 2007 LSAT. That's in section 1. And if we have time, we'll try to tackle some questions, logical reasoning questions from the December 2013 LSAT, which is Prep Test 71, the one that LSAC has just released publicly, so we can now talk about it, which is nice. I mean, it's been available, but it was under license restrictions, which means we couldn't talk about it without getting LSAC's approval, and they probably wouldn't like it on a free podcast going to everyone.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we have the June LSAT coming up pretty soon. It's on a Monday, June 3rd. The last day to register for the July LSAT is the day after, June 4th. So if you feel like you tanked June, I guess you still have a day to decide to sign up for July. At this point, most people should just sign up anyways. If you're taking June, unless there's something preventing you from taking July, there's really no downside since you can cancel after seeing your score. On June 27th, the June scores will be released, and on July 15th, you'll have the July LSAT. You can always email the show at help@thinkinglsat.com. Send us your selfies when you do if you're so inclined. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, and our lovely website. Thank you, Sarah, thinkinglsat.com. If you're so inclined, please leave us a review on iTunes. It helps spread the word about the show. I don't really have any updates on the demon. Oh, I guess I did put in these prompts or questions. People can click like the ask button in our joint project, lsatdemon.com. And those questions go to me and Nathan, although Nathan has kindly been fielding all of them recently, or most of them. And I saw these as they came through and thought that some of them were kind of funny. I don't know if you've seen any or want to read these, but maybe these are the kinds of things that you get, right?
Yeah, I've seen all of them, and some of them I have incorporated into my explanation, like this one from Joshua at the very top, that he hit the ask button, and then he, in the comments, he put, "This answer is bullshit."
That's it.
Yeah. And I did quote that in my explanation.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And then it was like, no, it's not. I explained to Josh why it was not bullshit. But yeah, I do appreciate the when people ask like specific questions, it's a lot more useful. Yeah, we got Josie here saying, really not sure what's going on here. We got some people just saying, hey, this question needs an explanation.
Yeah, so for this one with Naomi, I saw it was like a sequence of questions, and the first time she asked, she said, "Hi there, will you please provide an explanation for this question? Thank you." Then it was like, "Explanation, please." And then by the third time, she's just like, "EXP." That's all she wrote, and that's all we need, really. I mean, you'll know, right? It's more helpful if they can dig into the details a little bit, but at the end of the day, all we need to know is that you need help.
Yeah, if you encounter a question in the daemon that doesn't yet have an explanation or doesn't yet have a written explanation, yeah, all you got to do is hit the ask button, and I'll be on it. But I've done a couple hundred, maybe, over the past couple weeks. People were really hammering that ask button for a little while.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got inundated, and I apologize for being behind. But I got caught back up yesterday, all the way back up to inbox 0. So now I'm just sitting around waiting for people to ask me to explain stuff. So yeah, I do appreciate it when people, it's for their own benefit. I appreciate it when they ask a more specific question.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you just need help. So one of the things, and I don't know, I guess we never anticipated that this was going to happen, but people are like, I can't watch the videos because I'm out in public and I don't have my headphones or whatever. And can you do a written explanation? And so, yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah.
And all you got to do is hit the ask button. But if there's something that you're specifically confused about, it does really help if you can say what it is that you're not getting, because then it's just I don't know what you don't understand. And in my explanation, it like might just seem obvious to me why an answer is wrong, or why, but if you can just tell me what exactly, as close as possible, what it is that you don't get, then that'll help me to write a targeted explanation.
Cool. Yeah. So if you don't know about it, check out lsatdemon.com. That's where you can do questions, and it will adapt the questions that you're getting to your skill level and the kinds of things that you're struggling with. So we have an announcement here. Check out the new Thinking LSAT website. Let us know what you think. The link is on the current website and Facebook. So that's Sarah. Sarah's been recreating the website. If you have any feedback on that, you can just email the show at help@thinkinglsat.com, and that'll go right to Sarah, who is making the new website. I think it's pretty much done. Okay, so we have this email. This is the one about applying first to get admissions advice. Do you want to read this?
Sure. It says, "Hello. I know I do not pay for your class, regretfully, or anything. So there is no obligation to respond to me or read my email, but I received a strange email from WashU. It seems to be about applying to their school so they can give me law school admission advice."
Wow.
So
advice from the people you're applying to.
Yeah. So, yep. So here's the email. It's got a header that says WashU Law. And it says, "Dear Ilana, applying to law school can be exciting and daunting at the same time!" Exclamation point.
Jeez Louise. Why do people keep using exclamation point? I don't get it.
If you have questions about any aspect of the application process for law school, parentheses, not necessarily WashU Law, our admissions team is available for a brief consultation. You may schedule your consultation here with a link. The consultation will be most productive if we have your application on file in advance. Therefore, we have waived your application fee. You will be able to update your application if you choose after the consultation. We look forward to speaking with you. Best regards, Elizabeth. Elizabeth. Her title is Admissions Officer at WashU.
That's really interesting because
Yeah.
if you can get someone in the door and talking to you, I think they're most likely to go with you, right? Like if a student actually kind of takes these steps, these initial steps to apply and then schedule the consultation, and these people, this team has any emotional intelligence, they'll quickly win you over with their friendliness. If they're overly pushy and they try to drive you to their school, then they'll actually backfire. But if they do kind of a soft sell by just providing honest feedback on your application, I could see a lot of students talking to them, feeling rapport with this team, and then ultimately attributing those positive feelings to Wash U and then going there.
Yep.
I mean, they have sort of an incentive to give you bad advice in some ways, right? Like you could, like if they're really kind of stupid, but you could apply, they could say, oh, we like this person, but we're actually going to give them bad advice so that anywhere else they apply, their application doesn't look as good. But in the end, people would see right through that, I think. And so I think they're going to give you probably some good advice, not a whole lot maybe, but I think the real goal here is to get you started on your application and just kind of ease you into their school and win you over with their discussion.
Yeah, obviously the goal of this is not to give you admissions advice. Obviously the goal of this is to get you to apply to their school. Yes. They have one goal, to get you to apply to their school.
But I think that they will end up giving you some good pointers. I think that they're going to give a little to hope to get a lot. And so my guess is just even small comments here and there about how they look at your application. You'd be like, oh yeah, from your perspective, that looks a little weird or sounds a little strange or hasn't been addressed. And so then you might end up fixing your application in a way that would make it look better at another school.
Yeah, I would love if listeners schedule one of these consultations and get back to us.
Yeah, especially if you're not interested in going to Wash U, there's really no downside. You just apply and see what they have to say and judge for yourself whether you think their advice is good or bad. But it would be hard to hear something and not at least start thinking about what they have to say and making your application somewhat better in some way.
Yeah, I'm interested. I would just love to hear what they're even doing with this. You know, it says it's a brief consultation, you know. So I wonder if it's going to just be like very rudimentary, like here's how you get your application materials together, you know.
Yeah, although you have already had to apply, right? Or on file.
You don't have to. The consultation will be most productive if have your application on file in advance.
That's true, most productive, yeah.
I mean, what the irony is that once you do apply, then they've achieved their goal. And so then I don't think the consultation is going to definitely just be like a sales tactic, right? Like once they have your application. See, what you don't understand, like what students maybe don't get, I mean, our listeners do, but most people don't, is that this is like step one of the negotiation with Wash U. Like ultimately what you're talking about is price. You know, like they want you to, if you meet the minimum admissions criteria, then they want to admit you. And now you're negotiating over price, whether you know it or not. Yeah. And so if they're looking at your application and giving you advice about your application, you're also simultaneously negotiating on the $50,000 a year tuition. And it's, you know, I'm not saying that like what you were saying, Ben, like they're not going to actually give you bad advice about your application for other schools, but they're simultaneously negotiating with hundreds of other students of hundreds of other applicants of like varying levels of savvy, I guess. Yeah. And so you going in there asking them for admissions advice is almost like you're giving them information about how savvy you are as an applicant. And I don't know.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because your application is a set of documents, right? And when people review that application, there's so many things about you that are impossible to detect in these documents. As soon as you sit down and start talking to someone and they say things, you might instantly say, oh, wow, this person really knows what they're talking about, versus, What did you just say? You did what at your job? And so this is also an interview, right? Really?
Yeah, it is. It's just part of a negotiation. If you're going to end up going to Wash U, of course, if you're not going to Wash U, then it's nothing. Then you're just getting free information from them.
Yeah. I think this is brilliant on their part.
I do too.
This is a short email. I don't like the fact that it's all one paragraph, except for the last paragraph. I don't like the exclamation point, and I don't like that her name is all capitalized. But other than that, I think this is genius. Trying new things, getting ways to get people. It's like law schools have realized that they need to be better. They need to be better businesses, which is really what they are, which means better customer service, better outcomes, and it's going to take them a while to get there, but these are attempts. This is what competition does, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, what can we do? How can we get people here? How can we raise our numbers so that we don't lose people? How do we appease the ABA, which is now going after schools and shutting them down, right, if they don't meet their bar passage rates, or it might. We'll see if that actually happens. But these are all good things for the law school industry.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see the law schools having to watching the sharks competing.
Yeah, struggle, right? They have to struggle and get better, which is good.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, talking about negotiations, have I told you about the estimating Gandhi's age at death study?
No.
Okay, so basically the way this study was conducted is they took a bunch of people, they put them in a group. Now, almost everyone, or maybe everyone except one person, was actually part of the study. They were in on the study, and one person in the group was a study victim, or what's the right word? They were the actual
person in the study.
Yeah, the actual.
Everyone else was just a plant. Okay,
it was a plant, right? Yeah. So, but they go into this group setting and they think that everyone there is just like them, right? Oh, we've all been invited in, and we're having some discussion, or we're all part of the study, and the study leader or whoever comes into the room and says, "Hey, I'd like you to write down," or I can't remember if it was write down or say out loud or whatever, but estimate what age Gandhi was when he died, right? And in some of these groups, they had some of the plants necessarily state some ridiculous age, right? Like one person said, I think he died when he was 138. And it's just like, what? Like, it's stupid, right?
Wow.
It's stupid because no one's lived to 138. And then what they would discover, actually, maybe there was only one plant. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The point is that when someone would come in with that high number, the average for the group was a lot higher, right? I don't know when Gandhi died, actually. We could just Google it, but I think it was in his 30s, or maybe it was later. Maybe, no, he must
had to be later.
Yeah, like 60s, right? I'm thinking of pictures of him now. But anyways, whatever the age was, when the plant said such a high, even though it was a ridiculous number, it pulled up the average for that group by quite a bit. And then they'd have people come in and the plant would say something like, oh, I think Gandhi died when he was like 5. Again, just like ridiculous. Like Gandhi wasn't fucking 5. He did something with his life, Not that 5-year-olds can't do things with their life, but obviously he was not 5. And that would pull down the average. And so the point was that even when people are given ridiculous numbers, the anchoring effect changes how you look at the world, right? It changes how you estimate things and so forth. And the point of this, the reason I'm talking about it, is that when you go into a negotiation with a school and they're offering you 0, and you say, oh, I was expecting a full ride plus a stipend, they might on some level say, that's absurd. And they are going to say no to you, but you've planted in their minds a baseline, right? It's like, well, this student, for whatever reason, was expecting this. So whenever they come back with something, it's probably going to be higher than, even if it's just a few $1,000s, but it's probably going to be higher than what they would have offered you if you had come in with a quote reasonable or your value, right? Like you might figure out your value based on the 509 and say, hey, I deserve a 50% scholarship. But you don't want to say that. You say this higher number, and then they're going to negotiate against themselves before they even respond to you, because they're going to say, geez, this guy thinks he wants that. And a lot of this is not even conscious, right? It's subconscious, and it's, anyways, something to think about. And I think a lot of people hesitate to do that because they're worried about sounding ridiculous, just like saying Gandhi was 138 years old when he died, but it still affects people. Now, these people do this all the time, so it may not affect them as much, but we're all human, and it's going to, on some deep, visceral level, suggest to them too that you value yourself, right? And that is going to add value to you. A lot of this is perception. So anyways.
Yeah, the thing you're talking about is called anchoring, right, in negotiations. And there's another study where they, this one is really kind of bizarre, but it's like, how much would you pay for this something, coffee mug or whatever?
Yeah.
And they, right in front of your face, they spin a wheel. It's just a random wheel, and it's clearly generating a random number. And they spin the wheel, and it lands on some number.
Yeah.
And then how much would you pay for this coffee mug?
Yeah.
And the result of the wheel spin also influences the amount that people say they would be willing to pay for whatever the thing is.
Wow, that's interesting, because that has even less rational relation to the outcome.
It has 100%
like estimate.
It has 0% anything. It's just a purely random number.
Yeah.
But the anchoring effect is so strong that you get thinking about a number. And so when the number on the wheel is real low, then you just bid lower. And when the number on the wheel is real high, you bid higher. Even though it's, and you don't know that that's going on, but that's a thing.
That's interesting.
77, by the way, Gandhi was assassinated at the age of 77.
Okay, there we go. It's settled.
Yeah. Should we do this logic game?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So this is from the June 2007 test, which has been freely available for forever.
Yep.
And you just Google it and you'll find it. And this is the fourth logic game. The hardest one in the section, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I can jump in and read it. It says there are exactly 3 recycling centers in Riverton. Center 1, Center 2, and Center 3. Exactly 5 kinds of material are recycled at these recycling centers. So exactly 5 kinds of material are recycled. That means all 5 of them will be recycled. Glass, newsprint, plastic, tin, and wood. Okay. Given the fact that we have 3 centers and 5 kinds of materials are going to be recycled at these 3 centers, already in my mind I'm thinking, okay, so at some of these centers, I'm going to have more than one kind of material recycled there to get all 5 of them recycled. Each recycling center recycles at least 2, but no more than 3 of these kinds of material. So if each recycling center has at least 2, that means I have to have 2 slots, right, for each center. So I'm already thinking to myself, that's 6 slots and 5 kinds of material. So that means at least one of these materials is going to have to be recycled at more than one center. I guess I'm just taking the time to point this stuff out because it is the kind of thing that I stop and think about as I'm going through the initial setup, Whereas I feel like a lot of people might just kind of plow through it and just read each sentence almost without reading, right? It's like, okay, okay, okay. As opposed to actually thinking about what that might imply given what we already know, even if I haven't drawn anything yet. So it says, but no more than 3 of these kinds at each center. So we can have at most 9 things, 3 at each center. The following conditions must hold. Any recycling center that recycles wood also recycles newsprint. So I interpret that to mean if you're going to recycle wood, then you have to recycle newsprint. But it does not mean that if you recycle newsprint that you have to recycle wood. And I would just draw that as if W, then N.
Okay.
With an arrow.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even draw it.
You wouldn't draw it. I know, you like to wait
No.
till the end, right?
Well,
No, you wouldn't even draw it. Oh, okay.
These days...
Tell me about it.
Well, I find myself more and more incorporating these rules, if I can, just incorporating them into the diagram, incorporating them into the solution.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Instead of just this like rote LSAT robot thing that people do, like, yes, if W, then N, contrapositive, no N, then no W. But like, I feel like that diagram just ironically kind of makes people confuse sufficient for necessary sometimes. Like the whole purpose of doing that diagram is so that you don't confuse sufficient for necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But even having it on the page, like having the contrapositive on the page, sometimes just makes people do it. So if you can write it down and understand the implications, that's great. But I don't know. There's a lot of games now where I'm just like, okay, hold on. I would rather just incorporate this into worlds. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not sure if I can actually do that here.
So you're waiting until we've read through all the rules, and then as you go back to these rules, you might just write down 2 worlds, one in which you have wood and one in which you don't have wood.
Yeah, I mean...
Or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, here it's hard to do that because you've got 3 different centers and, at least one of them has wood. So, and I don't know where that is. And so that writing it down is like, okay, yeah. But it's interesting because that the game, the friends in the photograph game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That one is like the poster child for write down the conditional rules and link them together, and then you can do the contrapositive of like the whole chain.
Yep.
And it's this like nice show you can put on as an LSAT teacher.
Sure.
And it works, and you can kill that game if you know how to do all that. You can kill it.
Sure.
But the other night in my class, I was like, I've been teaching this game for 10 years, but let me do it an entirely different way. Mm-hmm. And instead, I just started with, I think I picked the first of the friends who had been mentioned twice. Mm-hmm. And I just said, okay, everybody's either in or out.
Yep.
So let me make a world where this person who had been mentioned twice.
Yep.
I'm going to make a world where this person is in the photograph, and I'll make a world where this person is not in the photograph.
Sure.
And then just incorporate the rules into the 2 different worlds because, well, if you're in, then, maybe it triggers the rule or depending on the rule, if you're out, it triggers the rule. But then the rules just like evaporate because you bake them into the solution. And what I ended up doing was then, you have to split to some of the rules can't just be easily incorporated, right? Like they don't get triggered.
Sure.
But then all you do is you just like say, oh, okay, so over here, S or whoever can still be in or out. Okay, so let me split it.
Yep.
And S is now in or out over here. And then let's follow the implications of that.
Yeah.
And see what happens. And I'm not sure which way is better. what I was telling my class is like, I think you should be able to do this both. Ideally, if you want to be really good at the games, you'd just be able to do it both ways.
Exactly. Yeah.
But there are lots of games where, boy, what's the one where the open and close? It's like certain number of there's like stations or something, and they have to be. It's like we're picking who's going to stay open and who's going to be closed. That game.
Stations.
I don't know if they're stations or whatever they are, but it's just it turns out to be a very simple grouping game. I mean, you can call it a grouping game. It's just like a certain number of these. It's not even a number, I don't think. It's just like some of these things are going to be open and some of these things are going to be closed.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, if you make two worlds out of, you just pick, it doesn't matter who it is. Like you just take, oh, okay, R.
Yeah.
And you make a world where R is open and a world where R is closed. And it triggers every single one of the rules. And you just bake them fully into your solution.
Yeah.
And all you're left with is like wildcards on both sides of the split. And it's so much better to do it that way than it is to write down all the stupid conditionals.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. I'm just like agnostic about whether or not it's a good idea, even to write down the rules.
Sure.
Because there's places where it's clearly better not to. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's cool. So a couple comments here. One is I generally don't write the contrapositive, in part because I'm noting the rule, and then as an if-then statement, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is an if-then statement that could vanish if I go ahead and create worlds on the basis of it, but I'm going to write down the rule first and then look at the rules and decide which rules I want to get rid of once they've been written down. But I understand, or I think I understand your argument, whereas in some games you're just like, I'm not even going to get to that point. I'm just going to write it down and skip that. And I definitely do that on occasion as well. So I think, that can happen. But interesting thing, have I told you about the total number of possible scenarios in a lot of these games? Have we talked about this before?
Well, I've seen you do it in class where you ask, especially when we make worlds.
Yeah.
You then do it as like a fun, extra credit, right, for the class to say, hey, how many different combinations are there?
Yeah, because so now that we're creating worlds so often, once you have the worlds set up, it's usually pretty easy just to kind of play them all out and then see how many scenarios there are. And what surprises me is I would say most, I don't know for sure, but we could sit down and figure it out someday, but I would say most games have only between 4 and 18 total scenarios, which to me is surprising, I guess. I don't feel like 18 scenarios is 4 especially is very small, but 18 scenarios is just not that many, right? Because most times when people look at the rules and all the possibilities, they feel like there's so many different ways the variables could be arranged. But most games have just a very few set of scenarios that could work.
Well, like the mining company game.
Yeah,
that just came out. I mean, that one, when you start making worlds and you realize that there's like, what, 4? Is that the one that's 4? Yeah, four total different outcomes in that game.
And that's the game that everybody was crying about on Reddit and other places and top law schools. But it's like, I mean, it was challenging for people because they didn't know what to do and they panicked. But here's what you can do. You can just start playing with the variables before you go into the questions. And this is what I say every time, and you're saying it as well, like at least stop and think about whether or not you should do worlds. Last night was my first class for the July LSAT, and I was telling people, I said, we did a game together, and it was game 1 in test 7, and we set up the rules, and I said, hey, so should we do worlds here? And here's how I would test, and here's how I would decide. And we ultimately decided not to do worlds because there was, you'd have to do a lot and they weren't that full, right? So it's like, geez, it's not worth the effort. But some people interpret that as, oh, are you saying that I should do worlds every time? And it's like, no, I'm not saying you should do worlds every time, but what you should do every time is decide whether or not you should do worlds. You should go through that calculation and try to figure it out. And when you do, then you can unlock the game when it makes sense. And even when you decide not to, you've gotten your mind more wrapped around the rules and you're going to be better at the questions. So when you encounter a game like this weird one that everybody was struggling with, if you had taken the time to play with the rules before going into the questions to decide whether or not to do worlds, you would have unlocked the game. Or at the very least, got your mind more wrapped around the rules and realized that it was easier as you were going through the questions.
Yeah, I mean, another way of thinking about that is you should be deciding whether you're going to make worlds, but you should be aggressively looking for opportunities to make worlds.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just so powerful. I mean, it just kills games. And it's like these days in baseball, everybody there's a lot of crying. Like my dad doesn't like the new style of baseball where they hit a lot of home runs. And
I didn't know this was happening.
Yeah,
why are they hitting more home runs these days?
Because they are like it has a lot to do with modern technology that they're like analyzing ball speed and trajectory and exit velocities and stuff when on batted balls. And
oh, really? So the batters are getting like very precise instruction on what to spot, and so then they're getting to the point where they're able to knock things out of the park.
Well, they're actually
literally,
yeah, they're actually changing their swings like intentionally to try to hit more home runs. So it used to be like old school baseball is like avoid striking out, hit the ball on the ground, intentionally. Like if you hit the ball on the ground, then, you don't make a fly ball out, and fly ball outs are terrible. Like we don't want to do that. So you want to try to hit, make sure you have a level swing or even like hit down on the ball to try to hit ground balls and then like run really fast. Well, the problem with that is that if you do that, then you just don't hit home runs.
Yeah.
And modern baseball, the way the Los Angeles Dodgers are these days, is they just are, almost all of them are just up there trying to hit the ball. Like if they're going to hit the ball, they want to hit it super fucking hard, and they want to hit it in the air, and they want to hit it out of the ballpark. And so
does that mean that you have more like extremes? So you have a lot more people who are like striking out, but you have more people who are hitting home runs, and on balance, their score is higher because even though you're striking out more, you have more home runs, which then guarantees those points.
Yeah, and the reason why my dad is like crying about it is that it is actually less exciting to watch because there's just less often are there like normal, like when someone hits the ball out of the park. I mean, that's an exciting moment, but like then the fielders don't do anything. They're all just standing out there, and the ball just goes sailing out, and the dude just runs around the bases, and it's like, oh, there we go, another home run. And it leads
as opposed to trying to steal or
bunt, sacrifice stuff. Bunt, like scratch out one run. The old school thing is like, okay, like just, oh boy, somebody finally got a single. Like they keep hitting it on the ground, and oh wow, one made it through, the gap between shortstop and third base, and the guy beat, the guy just barely beat out his infield single or whatever. And then it's like, okay, well now we're going to sacrifice bunt, give the other team an out, move the guy over to second base. And then now we're just like really hoping for one single, like we're going to score one run finally. And it actually is more fun to watch. Like a low scoring baseball is actually more fun for a baseball fan normally.
Sure.
But what the Dodgers and like modern teams are doing these days is they're just like, nah, fuck that. Like we're going to try to take walks and get runners on base. And then when we hit it, we're going to hit it really, really fucking hard. And our leadoff guy we want the guy who bats leadoff. It used to be like, oh, we're never put a guy who hits home runs like batting leadoff. No, we want like a fast guy who can steal bases and stuff. And now the Dodgers are like, no, fuck that. We're going to put Jock Peterson batting leadoff. And he already this year, 5 or 6 times, he's just led off the game with a home run. It's just like, well, 1-0.
Yep.
Because I just hit it out of the park. Okay, so super long digression. But the point was, when you can make worlds on logic games, you're giving yourself the opportunity to hit home runs.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting you say that, because that's what I wasn't saying anything about baseball, but now that you're saying that, that's what I was trying to tell people last night. Because some people were like, hey, look, I did this game without worlds, and I got them all right, and I finished it. And I'm saying, yeah, but how long did it take you? Well, it took me 9 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, this game took me 6, and it was easy. This is like 6 easy minutes. I'm not rushing anything. I'm confident in all my answers. I see why the right one's right. I see why the wrong ones are wrong, even when I don't need to check them. And that's 3 extra minutes. So, well, how would you like 3 extra minutes at the end of your test?
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah. And so if you get 2 home runs and you earn 3 minutes on one and 4 minutes on another, that's 7 minutes. That's the difference between someone finishing the last game and not.
Yeah.
Which is the difference between a 174 and a 169.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I say this all the time. I don't think I ever would finish. I don't even know how to do a timed section without doing worlds on some of the games. Like I don't, of course I could do it, but scratching out singles is not the way I want to play. You know, I don't want to stressfully brute force my way through game 1 and then stressfully brute force my way through game 2. You know, that student, the one who did the game in 9 minutes, they probably answered the first question before you answered the first question.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
But you answered the last question far before they answered the last question, because you were patient, you know, and sat there for a minute and played with it in your head and then started, okay, you know, there's this set of solutions, that's one world, and then there's this set of solutions, that's the other world. Yeah. And every solution has to start with either this or this. Okay, let me play with, okay, well, if it's this, then this is what that looks like. And if it's this, then that's what that looks like. And next thing you know, you realize, oh, it has somewhere between 4 and 18 total solutions. And then the questions are just like, yep, got that one, got that one, got that one, and that one, and that one. I'm done.
Yeah. And it's like ease, right? There's this ease that comes with that, as well as the fact that when you get an answer right, and this is where the confidence comes from, you know the 2 or 3 correct answers, and you look at their list of answers and you're like, yep, well, they only gave me one of those, and they purposely excluded these other 2 variables because they would be correct as well. It just shows a complete understanding of this test or the question and the game, as opposed to, oh yeah, I could see how that could be true. Next question, or let me just eliminate these other 4 because I'm not totally sure that could be true, and I just want to make sure that the others can't be true, which is fine. That will get you the answer, but you end the section a little more exhausted, which is going to affect the next section that you take.
Yeah, it's doing it. It's doing it passively instead of doing it actively.
Yeah. It's doing the work up front, like hitting a home run. You do all the work right there when you bat, and then you trot around the bases.
Yeah, completely. And you don't have to hit a home run on every single game. You just have to look for an opportunity to hit a home run. That's what I'm saying. Is it? And so that's where it's like, this is what I do in class now. One of the main things I'm doing in class is I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this game intentionally in a different way than I was thinking about previously. Just like, let's see what happens if I make worlds based on some weird thing. I mean,
Yeah.
there's games where I'm like, it's a sequencing game and there's one wild card.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, how about if I do something really stupid
Yeah.
and make worlds based on the wild card? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's see. There's 6 different places where the wild card can go.
Yeah.
Okay, this is going to be real dumb, and I start penciling it out.
Yeah.
But then you realize that the wild card just, it so happens that when you place the wild card into the 6 different spots, it doesn't directly impact anything because it's a wild card, but that was your player that had the most flexibility, and now that player has 0 flexibility, and all the other players have all these rules. And so it starts triggering. And it's like, so what happens is in some games, you could literally pick at random a variable to make worlds based on.
Yeah.
And so that's what I end up doing all the time now is like, okay, so go home and redo this game and make worlds based on this, and then redo it again and make worlds based on this, and then redo it again and make worlds based on this other weird thing. And it's just, I'm amazed. And then I think students can learn one of the most valuable things, which is there isn't a right solution. It doesn't matter whether you pick the correct way of doing it. What matters is that you do something.
Yeah, and even when there are better ways, like sometimes I've done worlds. The product managers, what is it? Product managers? The one where you have a product sales and management team.
Okay, I don't think I remember that game, but go ahead.
It's job applications, I think, and you have H and Y, and they're together, and they can either go in the product team or the sales team.
Okay.
In any case, because H and Y are together, it's like such an obvious way to do worlds. You're like, well, H and Y are together. They can't go in the management team because there's only one person in the management team. And so they have to go in product or they have to go in sales. So then you put them in product and you create one world, and then you do them in sales and you do another world. And so for years, that's how I did worlds for that game. It was just screamed worlds, right? In that way. And then we started talking about it, and we started talking about how you can create worlds off of if-then statements, which is what started this whole conversation. And I said, well, there's this if-then statement that says if X is in sales, then W has to be in production. I guess that's what it is, actually, not products, but production. And I said, well, wait a sec, let's try worlds on the basis of that. And the worlds on the basis of X are actually better in the sense that they're more complete and there's cleaner, At the end of the day, you get the same result, of course, whether you go down one path or another, because it's just logic. But the thing that's interesting to me is that if you create worlds on the basis of one rule for a game, and then you create worlds on the basis of another rule, and it seems better or more efficient or easier to read or fewer worlds or whatever, that's still a great learning opportunity. Like, oh, well, for some reason I was drawn to trying it this way. This other way, it actually has a better end result. Now I can be like, now you're aware of those opportunities, and you can dig even deeper and ask yourself, well, why? Why do I think this might have led to a result that's a little bit better? And can I look for clues that I should have noticed but didn't notice when I was mentally testing for worlds before I even started creating them? So I agree with you that there are multiple ways of doing a game, and there's no correct way per se, but sometimes there are better world setups, and that's just an opportunity to learn more. Like, why didn't I see that? What about it should have tipped me off, if anything? Maybe nothing, in which case this is just lucky in this one case or another. But when you can learn those things, then you become more sensitive to them again in another game.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm not saying there's not better and worse ways. I'm just saying that, in the 35 minutes, you don't have time to find the perfect,
Yes, and it's still going to work out.
That's my point.
Yeah.
is that you have to look for opportunities and just take it. Whatever it is you see, you just have to take it. And your solution and my solution and the other person sitting next to you, they're not going to look the same. But we can all get there by a variety of different roads. And so stop, because I think that's what happens with LSAT books. Like even my book, it has a solution.
Yeah.
But the point is not that that's the one best solution. In fact, I'm sure it's not the one best solution in many cases. It's just that's the solution that I saw that day, like that time that I was doing that game that day. I was like, oh, well, here's how, like, this will work.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to be. That's what students need to be going for, is just like, because, you get that thing where students are like, oh, just as soon as I saw the setup, like I just needed to see the setup.
Yeah. The best setup, the one.
The setup. Yeah, like that they think that that's just like, oh, well, if I just saw the setup, then I'd be fine. It's like, no, you're not getting, like, the point is there are many different setups. You have to do something that makes sense for you. But there's so many different ways to get there. You just have to get there. You have to find a way. That's it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I would just want to clarify for anyone listening that don't use that as an excuse to then be like, well, I came up with a way and it worked, therefore I don't need to do any more with this game. Like, if the game took you 15 minutes and you got one wrong, or even if you got none wrong, that are you doing it the most effective way possible? Like, when you look at your work, did you have to test out 3 of the answer choices? That game that we did last night, I did all the work on the board. And when we were done, we had only drawn the original set of rules and one mini diagram for question number 3, which was an if question. It was the first if question. And all the other questions we answered by going back to that question number 3. And it's like, well, look, this question number 3's mini diagram kind of touches on what's being talked about here, so let's use it to answer this question. And we ended up doing it for all of them. So the whiteboard had a diagram and then one mini diagram, and that was it. And I'm like, this is all of my work for this game. So if your paper is all marked up, there's things to learn. So even if it worked and it's a way, there might be other ways that are better.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So do games, try them different ways. If you did worlds, try to do it without worlds. If you did worlds or didn't do worlds, definitely try to see if you could do worlds, or try to do worlds on the basis of different things, crazy things, yada, yada.
Yeah, like if you were not allowed to do worlds the same way, like it's like, okay, well, let me see you do it again, but you can't do it that way.
Yeah.
What would you do? Mm-hmm. just play with it. Just think about it.
Yeah.
And when you realize that there's so many different ways to get there, I think that's how people become calm and just really destroy the games on the test day, because they're not freaking out about, like, I have to see the setup for this game or else I don't, I'm just going to try to answer the questions.
Yep.
And then they're freaking out, and melting down. And instead they need to be like, oh, well, there's probably 10 different ways that I could solve this game. Who cares? I'll just do one of them. Like, okay, this looks like maybe a good way to do it. Let's try this. And it's like, yeah, that'll work. It'll all work.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I guess we should get back to this.
Yeah, this game, right? Okay, so we have these 3 recycling centers. There's 5 kinds of materials: glass, newsprint, plastic, tin, and wood. Each center has at least 2 things that it recycles, and at most 3 things that it recycles. The first rule that was listed says any recycling center that recycles wood also recycles newsprint, which technically means if you recycle wood, then you have to recycle newsprint, but not the other way around. And then the next rule says every kind of material that center 2 recycles is also recycled at center 1. This is also a conditional rule. Basically, if you're recycled at 2, then you have to be at 1, but that doesn't mean that if you are at 1, you necessarily have to be at 2. Only one of the recycling centers recycles plastic. Okay, so plastic is only going to go to one of the centers. And that recycling center does not recycle glass. So glass and plastic cannot be together, which means we're going to put P in one of these centers, and then we're going to have to put glass somewhere, but not in that center. So in at least one of the other 2 centers. Alrighty. So those are all the rules. This sounds like a typical grouping game to me. I have 3 places, and I got to figure out where these variables are going to go into these groups. So I would set it up by having 1, 2, 3 listed horizontally, and then below each of those numbers, I'd have 2 slots to symbolize to myself that I have to have at least 2 things in each group.
Yep.
Okay. Given the fact that they do have a maximum, sometimes for this game, I've put a dotted line below those 2 slots to symbolize to me that I could have one more, but no more than one more in each of those groups.
Yeah. I sometimes would put a third space and then a third slot, and then put parentheses around it.
Okay. To show you
as like a
different.
Maybe,
Sure. Okay, so let's talk about that first rule. This is the one we were kind of debating, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to write down if W arrow N to say that if you have wood, then you have to have N, or newsprint. And you're saying, well, wait, maybe I wouldn't even draw that rule at all. Would you split this game on the basis of that rule?
No.
Into worlds? Okay.
I wouldn't. Although you certainly could. I mean,
you certainly could.
Fact,
How would that play out?
Well, I think what I would do is I would make I think I would look at center 2.
Okay.
And I would make a world where center 2 has wood and a world where center 2 does not.
Okay, sure.
Because that's a fair split, right? Every solution, it's fair to say that center 2 does or does not have wood.
Yep, you could do it on the basis of that.
Okay, and so now I'm not sure that's like the perfect solution, but this is certainly a way you could do it. Mm-hmm. This is, for the listeners, this is exactly what we're talking about. You should get a piece of scratch paper and try this. Just try it, see what happens. Because I'm thinking if I put in the world where center 2 does have wood, then it also has to have newsprint.
Yep.
And then center 1 has to have both wood and newsprint.
Yep.
So that's kind of like a lot.
Yeah.
My guess is that then center 3 can't have wood because you can't have wood and newsprint 3 times, right? Isn't that going to just use up too many spots?
Well, it seems like it would. If you had wood and newsprint in all 3, then you'd have 3 slots left. One would have to be for... Well, one of them would be shared between 1 and 2. So you really only have 2 slots left.
And so there it's clear you can't do it because you still haven't used plastic, you haven't used glass, and you haven't used tin. And you do have 3 slots.
Yeah.
But when you put a third thing in center 2, that third thing has to also be in center 1. And so you're going to run out of spots there. So that world where center 2 does have wood, it's not like it gets totally completed, but you do know that center 3 doesn't get wood.
Yeah, that's right. And 1 and 2 are almost full.
Yeah. Now, in the other world where center 2 doesn't have wood, I guess not that much happens. But it would be very tempting then to split again, right? Like, so I'm thinking about it in that world. I mean, somebody has to have wood.
Someone has to have wood.
And
where could that wood go?
Well, yeah, I mean, it could go 1 or 3 or both.
Yeah.
Although I'm wondering if both, it seems like both wouldn't work maybe. I'm trying to think, because if you had wood and newsprint in center 1 and wood and newsprint in center 3, I'm thinking, what does center 2 have? Like, it would have to have newsprint
Yeah.
in order to have two shared things with center 1.
Yep.
And then it now, okay, so it has newsprint for sure. So now you got newsprint in all 3 centers. I feel like you're using up an awful lot of spaces. Like, you still haven't used plastic or glass or tin.
Yeah.
So I don't think that seems far-fetched. So maybe that works, but I'm thinking about how that would be possible. I think you're going to run out of spots. So my guess is,
yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know for sure. Like, that's a really good exercise, I think, for people at home. If if you have the time to press pause on the podcast and just work your way through it and see what happens. Okay, but that's not actually what I would do with this game.
Okay. So maybe we do write it as, if you have W, then you have N? Or what would you, okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now,
Sure.
I'm going to do a small thing here. I'm going to have it be a vertical rule. I'm going to have W, and then I'm going to have the arrow go down from W, point down to N. So in my head, it's kind of visually representing what's happening in the game. Like, if you have W in a column or a group, then N is going to be in that same column.
In the same group, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then the next one says every kind of material that center 2 recycles is also recycled at center 1. So I'm just going to actually draw an arrow that goes from 2 to 1. Just so I remember that anything I put in 2, I got to go put over into 1.
Yeah, like an arc arrow kind of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And then only one of the recyclable centers recycles plastic. To me, that is pretty significant because we know that plastic can now not go into.
Yep. And I think that at that point, when you make that realization, I just can't imagine not making 2 worlds based on plastic.
Yeah. I mean, there's only 2 options. It's also tied into this other rule with glass. So now you know that glass can't go there. And just to clarify, I know that sometimes people get confused about this, but if plastic can only go once and anything that goes in 2 has to go in 1, then it can't go in 2 because then plastic would have to go in 1 as well, right? So then you'd have 2 plastics. That violates the rule. So plastic can never go in 2, which means it has to go in 1 or 3. And when it goes in 1, we know it's going to be the one that doesn't go in 2, right?
Yeah, it has to be the third thing, basically.
Yeah, it has to be the third thing in 1 because the 2 other things are going to be repeated from 2.
Yeah, and so it's like so much happens because you know that it can't be in 2 because plastic can only go once.
Yeah.
But if you put the third thing in center 1 and that third thing can't be in center 2, then that actually means that center 2 can only have 2 things for sure.
Yeah.
In that world, center 2 gets maxed out. Like, there's only 2 things. There's not a third thing in center 2 if center 1 has plastic. Not only that, but
you now know that glass has to be in 3.
yeah, because center 1, if it has plastic, can't have glass. If center 1 can't have glass, then that means center 2 can't have glass because anything in center 2 has to go in center 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so glass now has to go somewhere. So then glass has to go in center 3. And then actually more happens.
All right, what else happens?
Well, if you have wood, you have to have newsprint.
Yep.
And so I'm looking at center 1, which has plastic, which means it can't have glass.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to have 2 more things out of wood, newsprint, and tin.
Yep.
2 out of the 3 of wood, newsprint, and tin. But if you have wood, you have to have newsprint.
Yep.
And so
mm-hmm.
yeah, the only way to have 2 out of the 3 of wood, newsprint, and tin, if wood requires newsprint, is that you have to have newsprint.
Yep.
And when you put it in center 1, then it actually now has to also go in center 2 because center 2 has to have 2 things. and each of those two things have to be in center 1.
Yeah, just step back there. So what we're doing is we're looking at center 1. Center 1 has at max 3 things that can go in it. One of them is already taken. It's plastic. So you have 2 left, and glass can't go there because it can't go with plastic. So now we have 2 slots left, and they can only be filled by W, T, or N. And if you have W, you have to have N. Here's one way to think about it. If you have tried to avoid N, if you just had W and T in those last 2 slots, W would require N. So there's no way to avoid N when you only have 3 variables left and one of them requires another one of those variables. So I'm not trying to make that too confusing or abstract, but the point is if you try to avoid N, you're going to run into a problem because those 2 slots would be filled with W and T, which doesn't work because W needs N. So at least one of the slots will have to be N. The other one could be W or it could be T, because although W needs N, N doesn't necessarily need W.
I'm tempted to split that world, actually.
On the basis of W and T?
Yeah. Because,
yeah, I mean, those are the only 2 options, right? It's either going to be N with W or it's going to be N with T in group 1.
I'm actually just going to do it really quick here because I feel like, yeah, I mean, it's either T in both 1 and 2, or it's W in both 1 and 2.
Sure, yep.
And then in the world where, I mean, I know that there's no third thing in center 2 in that world. And I still, in the world where I put tin in both spots, I haven't used wood yet. And so wood has to go in center 3, which means newsprint has to go in center 3. And in that world, I'm done now.
Yep.
And the other world where I put wood in center 1 and 2, I haven't used tin yet.
Yeah.
And so tin has to go in center 3. Now that means there's no room for wood in center 3 because it would be wood and newsprint. You can't have 4 things because glass was already there.
But you could have N. You just don't have to.
I could have N and that's it. So maybe I'll put N in parentheses.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. Yeah. It's like there, like that's your one option. Just don't forget about it.
So, so the crazy thing is, if you put plastic in center 1, there's 3 total solutions.
Yep. 3. Yep.
Okay. And in the world where plastic went in center 3?
We now know that glass has to go somewhere. It can't go in 3, so it's got to go in 1 or 2. If it goes in 2, then obviously it's going to go in 1. But if it goes in 1, could we avoid it going into 2?
I think so, if it was the third thing.
Yeah, if it was the third thing. So, I mean, one thing that is true about both of those worlds, you know, like, I guess what I'm thinking to myself is either G is going to go in 1 or it's going to go in 2 because it can't go in 3. If it goes in 2, then it goes in 1. If it goes in 1, it goes in 1. So either way, G has to go in 1. I mean, we could split here. We could create a world where G is in both, and then a world where G is just in 1.
Yeah, that would be one way to split it, for sure.
I mean, the only reason I'm kind of leaning towards that is that split would actually, well, at least for one of the worlds, it would determine exactly how many are in group 1 and in group 2. Because if G is the lone wolf in group 1, then there can't be 3 things in group 2.
Yeah, okay. And then again, it's like, well, when in doubt, just do something.
Yeah.
So
sure.
As long as I don't make any mistakes.
I don't think I've ever done it this way before. I think I've always just assumed, oh, well, if G is in 2, then it's in 1. And if it's in 1, then it's in 1. So G's in 1. And just left it at that. But, I mean, I don't think this definitely won't hurt. You can always just stop As
Right.
long as everything that you've written down must be true, and then go into the questions. And if a question happens to tap into a semi-empty world, at least you know you're in that world, and you just keep moving forward from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we made this split because I'm looking at the world now where glass is not in center two.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If it's in one but not two, then center two can only have two things, but it already doesn't have plastic. Now it doesn't have glass. So we get into that same situation of wood, newsprint, tin.
Yep.
I have to pick at least two. That means I have to have, or exactly two in this world. That means I have to have newsprint.
Mm-hmm.
And once I have newsprint in two, then that means I have to have newsprint in one.
Yep.
Thinking about, well, and then shit, you could split that, but do the wood tin thing again.
The exact same thing, yeah. Well, because the number of people in each group is constrained, if you do T in groups 1 and 2, then you know W has to be in 3, which again means N has to be there as well.
Yep.
And just like before, if you put W in 1 and 2, then you know T has to go in 3, which means N could be in 3 or maybe not. So
Yeah,
we'll put that in
not
parentheses.
wood. Wood can't be there. So it's N with the parentheses around it.
Yep.
And again, on that side, there's 3 solutions.
Yeah.
On the other side, where center 1 and 2 both, where center 2 has glass.
Yeah. So either we have W and then we also have N in group 2, or we just have T or we just have N. So there actually are a decent number of options here.
I'm like, but I'm real tempted to just split it based on like wood now.
Yeah.
You know,
because
that-
wood's got to go somewhere.
That original idea of like wood in center 2 or not.
Yeah, because it can't go wood could. One way to look at this right now is wood can go in center 1, center 2, or center 3. If it goes in 2, then it's obviously going to go in 1, and if it goes in 1, it's ultimately going to have to. Well, no, it doesn't have to go in 2, does it? Because you could have W and N in 1, and then you could just have N by itself in 2.
But if wood doesn't go in, so when wood goes in 2, then it like almost gets completely filled up.
Yeah, so you're thinking of creating a world where W does go in 2 and a world where W doesn't go in 2. Just
Yeah,
those two
because
options.
if it doesn't go in 2, I guess it could go in 1. Then newsprint would have to go in 2.
Yeah, I mean, again, you could do the world where W is in 2, and that would fill out quite a bit. In fact, that would determine almost everything except for group 3 wouldn't be totally determined.
You just don't know if you have newsprint or not.
You just don't know if you have
Again.
newsprint. Same thing.
Yeah.
Same things are being tested, which is actually why when you do these worlds, they can go faster and faster because it's like you're seeing the same inferences being made in other worlds, and so you just fill them out quickly. And then in the world where W is not in 2, then we have 2 options left. We have T or N.
It's actually pretty easy to just do that final split. I mean, we've split it so many times now, but
It's like the last hurrah. Yeah. I mean, this is where like execution would come into play. Like, are you determined to just keep going? Because it actually won't take that long if you just keep going. It's because we're talking about it and hesitating on whether we should go or not. Yeah, that's going to drag this out. But I probably would have decided to stop after our third world or fourth world. I would have just said, "Oh, I'll just leave that empty and then fill it in as necessary." But now that we're going down this path, we're going to have all the answers. We're going to have all the possible scenarios. In fact, we'll know how many different ways this game can go down. And let's see if it's between 4 and 18. See if I'm crazy. So what are you splitting for the... this is the last world where W is not in 2.
right. So when W is not in 2, and this is where where glass is in 2.
Yeah.
Glass is in 1 and 2, and W's not there. Well, you have to have tin or newsprint.
Yep. So either do one world where tin is in 2 or n is in 2, which is going to fill up 1, or at least start to fill it up.
I guess there's still flexibility there because you could have both.
You could have both. Well, you know, for at least the world where you have tin in 2 and tin in 1, W has to go in 3.
That's true.
Because it can't go in 1 or 2, which means
N has to go there. Yeah.
Yep. And then we have n in parentheses for 1 and 2, really.
Yep.
Okay, so that world is still a little bit flexible. Okay, so GN is in 1 and 2, P is in 3. Yeah, you could add W or T. That's a decent number of possibilities.
You could split that one again. But so it does turn out to be, I think there's probably more than 18 here.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like what ends up happening in all of them. It's just over and over and over and over is newsprint, yes or no. Right? It's just that extra newsprint can be, especially a lot of our worlds, it's just like center 3 could have newsprint or not. And what we're doing now in the worlds where glass are in 1 and 2, we're going to get a lot of maybe newsprint happening.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's actually not that bad. I mean, I added up all the number of scenarios we have so far, excluding this last world, and we're only at 11. So there's only 11 possibilities so far. Now, with this last world, you know, I'm not sure how many would go there, but it's pretty close to 18, I imagine, total.
Yeah, I think you're right. Should we
let's do
knock out the questions? Yeah.
Yeah. So we have one world that's still a little flexible. But so question 18, which of following could be an accurate account of all the kinds of material recycled at each recycling center in Riverton? Oh, by the way, sorry, before we go into these questions, last point here is if you play this all out and you realize, maybe this wasn't worth the effort because we're going to have to create all these scenarios and so forth, that itself is going to add to your experience and intuition about when you should abandon your worlds and when you should keep going with them. When are they going to almost close out and when are they going to keep going? So, in any case, it's good practice.
We would have stopped at some point, right? Like
for sure.
But we would have made the first cut and maybe one more cut, and then we would have said, okay, well, there's these pretty constrained solutions, and then there's this way over here where we have more solutions. But then just dive into the questions and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay.
18?
18. So this is just a process of elimination, which means I'm generally going to go back to the original rules as opposed to worry so much about the worlds, unless I've made some key inference in the worlds, like F always has to be third, and that wasn't obvious in the rules. So the rule I'm going to look for first is GP, maybe. Can't go together.
But I would think I would do both at once. I would look for exactly one plastic and glass can't be there.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
So A is fine, B is fine, C is fine, D, glass and plastic are together, so that's out.
Okay.
And for E, we have plastic twice, so D and E are gone. Then we have if you have wood, then you also have to have newsprint. That's an easy one to look for. So I'm scanning for wood.
Yep.
And I see that in A, and I see it in all 3 centers, but there's not newsprint in center 3, so that's a problem. So A is out.
Yep.
B, I'm scanning for wood again, and it looks like we're fine. And in C, scanning for wood, and we're fine. It has newsprint. So last rule, if it's in 2, then it's got to be in 1. Let's just take a look at B and C. That's all we have to look at. In B, we have GNT, and in center 2, and in center 1, we have GNT, so that's fine. So let's look at C. We have GNT, and then in center 1, we have GNW. So that's a problem. So C is out. The answer is B.
Yeah, we've tested all the rules. We've eliminated A, C, D, and E. So 100% certain that the answer is B.
Yep. I'm going to go ahead and skip to the if questions because one of our world is not very complete.
Yep.
If center 2 recycles the three kinds of material, which one of the following kinds of material must center 3 recycle? So if 2 does 3, we know we're only in a couple of these worlds, actually. I can see already that if we have 3, then we have to have N in center 2.
In center 2, yeah, but it's asking about center 3.
Okay. And then which of the following kinds of materials must center 3 recycle? Well, in both of those worlds, center 3 had P, right? So,
yeah, and that was like our first split, right? Like number 20, we could have answered with that very first split.
Yep.
We realized that when in the world where center 1 has plastic, that means center 2 can only have 2 things.
Yeah.
And so if center 2 is going to have 3 things, then we have to be in the world where center 1 does not have plastic, which means center 3 has plastic, and that's the answer.
Yeah. 21. If each recycling center recycles exactly 3 kinds of material, which I find could be true. Well, if all 3 do 3, then again, I'm looking at these 2 worlds where GG goes twice in 1 and 2. Which one could be true? Could only center 2 recycle glass? No. In both of those cases, center 2 and center 1 recycle glass. Only center 3 recycles newsprint. If each center has exactly 3, then we have to have newsprint in more than 1. So that's out. C, only 1 recycles plastic. No, that's not a possibility. Only center 3 recycles tin. Oh yeah, that's a possibility.
Yeah, I've got it on the page.
Yeah, right here. Okay, so that's the answer.
Yep.
22. If center 3 recycles glass, all right, so we're back into our first world, our first split. Which one of the following kinds of materials must center 2 recycle? Well, let's see. Oh, in both of our worlds where G is in 3, we know that N has to be in 2.
Yeah, and that's a likely answer just because N is the necessary condition for W.
Yep.
W for 22 is a terrible answer because it's the sufficient condition on the rule.
Yeah.
I mean, if wood were the answer, then newsprint would also have to be the answer. So
Yep.
It can't be wood, obviously. But newsprint, because it's the necessary condition, that's just going to get forced into the in group a lot. And that's what happens here.
Yeah. If center 1 is the only recycling center that recycles wood, okay, if 1 is the only one that does wood. Ooh, so that means wood is the lone wolf in
The
center
third
1.
floater, yeah.
Yeah, and not in center 2. So the only place that we see that as a possibility is actually in our world where we didn't finish it.
Yep, where we have glass in 1 and 2, plastic in 3, newsprint in 1 and 2.
Yep.
And then you'd have to put wood as the third thing in center 1.
Okay. Which one find could be a complete and accurate list of the kinds of material that one of the recycling centers recycles. Okay, plastic and tin.
That looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's
for center 3. Right.
Center 3. Now, if you're not confident because this world wasn't completed, you could quickly go through the rest. Newsprint and wood, no, because all of them have to have G or P.
Yep.
Newsprint and tin, again, GP. Glass wood.
That's dumb,
no.
because if you have wood, you have to have
newsprint. Yep, yeah. And then glass tin, same problem. We have to have either P along with it, or we have to have N. The answer is A. Okay, now I skipped 19 because that was a non-if question.
Yep.
Which one follows a complete and accurate list of the recycling centers in Riverton, any one of which could recycle plastic? Well, we decided that 1 and 3 could. So
yeah, 1 and 3.
Answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, D. All right, bottom line there is I probably would not play out the worlds as far as we did, but it's still interesting to see that the total number of possibilities here isn't actually that high.
And it took us a lot longer to talk about playing out those worlds than it would have if we were actually just doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at my page and I have kind of it's kind of messy because of like I the way I split it, I just didn't keep it very organized. But answering those questions became trivial.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't done all those worlds, I would have had to do some more work for a lot of those questions, I think. Mm-hmm. Like if you think about like 21, if each of them recycles 3 kinds of material, I don't know. I think that would have been a lot harder if we had. I mean, because with all the worlds like all played out, it's just like, oh, bang, like, okay, I can see there's like 2 templates where that's going to work, and it just like we have the answer.
Yeah.
So even if it had taken, 6 minutes to do all those scenarios, it then would have taken 60 seconds to answer all the questions.
Yeah. I don't know that it would have taken 6 minutes. My guess is like more like 4.
I'm saying even if it did.
Yeah.
That's my point. Is that like actually I think this might be it might turn out to be the best way to do the game. Even though it seems like, oh my God, like, do I really want to keep splitting and splitting and splitting? It's like, well, but you're just going to play out all of the possibilities, and then when you get to the questions, it's just going to be like bang, bang, bang. I'm talking about literally 60 seconds to answer all the questions.
Yeah.
So when that happens, it's like definitely it turns out to be a home run.
Yeah.
And even if it's not a home run, even if we stopped somewhere earlier, it would still be fine because it would be like we were making progress. We were learning things about the way the game works.
Yeah.
All right. That was a long logic game.
Yeah. Good luck with that. If you made it to the end of this,
yeah.
Congrats.
We should have like a bonus reward for people who made it to the end of this one.
A discount or something. No, you found it. Cool. Well, we should probably wrap it up there. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, we can just get to the pearls versus turds next time, and we can do the we'll start cranking away on the newly released, what is it? Prep Test 71?
71, yeah.
We'll do that next time. Oh, wait. Next time we're also going to return to Game 3 from June 2007 because we gave people homework, remember, to play around with that game. And make worlds and stuff. So we'll get back to that next time. Probably won't take us nearly as long since we already did half the game.
Yeah. If you haven't joined the Facebook group on Facebook, feel free to do so. It's the Thinking LSAT podcast group. We have 1,300 some odd members there. You can follow us on Instagram at Thinking LSAT. You can follow us on Twitter at Thinking LSAT, or Nathan at nfox, or me at Olson Benjamin. If you want to take one of my classes in DC, go to strategyprep.com. Nathan's classes in LA and San Francisco, you can learn more about those at foxlsat.com, including online and one-on-one options. Our joint project is lsatdemon.com. And that's that. So that was show number 193. Thanks all y'all for listening. Nice knowing you. Don't pay for law school.